Hi everybody, welcome to TGCC and Beyond, where to from here. We're sure to see people coming in. Yep, it's fantastic. I can see the number of participants starting to climb, which is fantastic. Thank you for registering. Thank you for joining for the live session. My name is Alex, and I'm really delighted to be sharing with you today's presentation on TGCC and Beyond, and also to kind of share his experience of being both a TGCC participant and what it means to have gone beyond that. We have Henry on the call as well. Give us a wave, Henry. Yes, absolutely. So hopefully everybody's doing well. Hopefully everyone's keeping safe. I know it's pretty interesting times. I'm sure you've probably been on a number of webinars throughout the last couple of months, but we are excited to have you on this one. Just a couple of housekeeping things. Your mics and cameras are currently off. You can send questions in the Q&A. We would prefer them in the Q&A section, or you can chat sometimes with us. You'll see some messages in the chat section from Crimson staff member Kyle coming through there a little bit. So make sure you're checking those chat messages when they come through. We recommend you plug in your charger or your computer, whatever you're on right now, to turn your phone on silent and to get comfy. Today's presentation should take around 45, 50-ish minutes, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, but we'll definitely have all the information across to you within the hour. And this is a great opportunity for you as well to ask heaps of questions, particularly of Henry, who's been through the experience of being a TGCC alum and now a current student of University of Pennsylvania. So we'll just give it another minute or so as people start coming in. In the meantime, it'd be great if we could share the poll. So in the polling section, the getting to know you poll is what we'll start off with. So I'm just going to launch that now. I think I can do that. Fantastic. So we would love to know, for the people who have joined us this evening, what do you want to study at uni? If you don't know, that's fine. There is a not sure yet option there as well. But it will really help us to, make a more informed webinar for you and hopefully customize it a little bit more. Of course, we're expecting it to be leaning somewhat heavily towards the business, economics and finance degrees, but that's good to see. Which unis are you aiming for? Whether you're aiming for, top US, top UK, if you're aiming for universities in the EU, local universities potentially, or you might not be too sure which universities you're aiming for, that's totally fine. It's good to see that we've got a 69 or 71% of students aiming for business, economics and finance. So, the bulk of what we're going to be talking about tonight will be in that kind of category, I guess. But of course, no matter what you study, you can go various pathways after TGCC. And, if that's to a degree such as medicine or science, tech, engineering and maths, of course, it's a very flexible extracurricular that can take you in a lot of different directions at uni and also can really help in your university applications, which is what we're going to give some insight to this evening. Henry, is there anything that you're particularly looking forward to this evening, or anything that you think the students should really stay tuned for?
Well, I think, and hello everyone. I think definitely when it comes to, for many of you, you're done with the TGCC now. So I think what's quite exciting for a lot of you guys is how are you going to use your experiences, what you've learned in TGCC through, constructing the case and through attending all of our workshops. How do you convert that into kind of future activities, extracurriculars, and, how do you use that to help your applications? I'm very excited to discuss that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a critical thing. And obviously you've had that experience. So we did have, I think, about 200 or so people registered for this evening. We've got, a few people still joining at the moment. So we'll give them just another moment before we get into the actual presentation. And if you want, I would highly recommend, if you've got a minute, to follow Crimson Education on Instagram and subscribe to the Crimson Education YouTube channel. That's packed with resources. I'm sure a lot of you already are either a follower of the Instagram or subscribe to the YouTube channel. But if you're particularly aiming for international universities like in the US or UK, that's full of interesting resources and facts. And also one other Instagram channel, if you're interested, is in International Study Abroads, which is an ambassador program, International Study Abroad program. So that's a fantastic Instagram channel as well. They have some really cool posts. I actually learned what a dangling modifier was finally from that channel last night. Who would have thought? I've been in journalism for a while, and I thought I should have known that a lot earlier, but there you go. Any case, let's get into it. I'm going to end this poll, and we will get into it. I'll share the poll results as well. You can see there the majority of people aiming for the business, economics, and finance, majority of people aiming for top US unis. Got a couple of people who are not sure. Hopefully today you can get some clarity on that. If not today, then definitely on Sunday's session with some fantastic experts speaking about US, UK, and European unis. And if you're aiming for local unis as well, that's great to see. Okay, let's get into it for TGCC and beyond. So the goals of this webinar are really to show you how TGCC can pave your path to the world's top universities and show you how to use your experience in TGCC in future uni and job applications as well. Introduce you to some top business courses around the world. So some courses that you may not have heard of before, we're going to show you a couple of those and help you understand the long-term advantages of studying at top US or UK unis. So right now, if you're already keen on that pathway, that's fantastic. We hope that motivates you further. If you're interested in studying at a local university and you're kind of looking at that overseas option, but you're not sure what the advantages are, we'll touch on that a little bit as well. We want to answer your questions, so please keep the questions coming in the Q&A section, and that will be upvoted, and then we'll have Annie chiming in to help us kind of sort through those questions. Annie being a current UChicago student as well, so probably qualified, very well qualified to answer them as well. But we really want to help you make an informed decision about your future. So Henry, over to you. Introduce yourself so people know a little bit more about you.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. So yeah, you guys probably know me from the previous webinars and workshops that TGCC has held, but if not, so I'm Henry. I am currently a freshman at the University of Pennsylvania, planning to study economics. So in high school, I studied economics, physics, chemistry, maths, and English. And so when I applied for both the US and the UK, and in roughly, I think it was April this year, it came down to a choice between UPenn and University of Oxford. And I'll get into why I picked UPenn a bit later on in this webinar as well. So to go over some of my extracurriculars and awards during high school, I founded a refugee youth peer mentoring program. I founded a business society. And, you know, a lot of these were kind of things that I did after the TGCC, where I kind of was able to get a lot of different ideas for things to do. And as you can see, I also participated in an essay competition as well. And in terms of my long-term plans, I plan to go into some sort of entrepreneurship or tech or VC career field.
Fantastic. So really looking forward to your insights on this webinar, Henry. So firstly, if you haven't heard of Crimson Education before, you want to know a little bit more about how Crimson helps students like Henry to gain admission to top universities in the US and UK. Basically, we have around 2,400 tutors and mentors, 250 full-time staff, 20 offices around the world. We supported some 20,000 plus students in a range of different areas, whether that be academics, extracurriculars, or university admission. And you can see some of our lovely experts there. So it's people who really know what's going on in terms of university admissions. They've often been through this path themselves. So they really know it very, from a first-hand experience, as well as from the experience of helping students through the application process. So they're really, the best people. It is just a couple of different people that I have the photos of, but we have, as I said, heaps of these people who are super well qualified to help figure out your path to these top universities. Okay, and just the Crimson Group as well, you don't just have Crimson Education. Crimson Education is like a wider thing with organizations like MedView, EduExperts, Numberworks and Words, the online high school Crimson Global Academy, the Crimson Rise Tutoring, which is for younger students, Crimson Athletics for any students who are aiming at US sports scholarships, and the Crimson Research Institute, which gives you the opportunity to work with fantastic professors from around the world as well. And you can see there just a couple of our partners in media. Some of these are Australian based, some of these are international. You can see a couple of the stories there on the right-hand side of both the CEO, Jamie, and co-founder Chandra, as well as a couple of past Crimson students who have gone through the high school process whilst juggling, their international applications, which is a bit of a challenge if you're looking at doing that, but, successfully gained admission to top universities with that extra support. And recently as well, actually, Crimson had a partnership or was, had some strategic relationships with QS World Universities and Times Higher Education. So if you're familiar with those ranking models, you might see Crimson's name pop up on there as well. these are our results over the last couple of years. So Ivy League, Oxbridge, obviously we help students get into those top universities, but we do help students get into any university and any course. So really wide range of expertise that we have. And you can see there on the bottom right, students with Crimson have about 3 times the rate of the general public in gaining admission to these top universities. What you can do if you would like to start chatting with an expert and really learn more about the application process, what are your chances, what are the courses you should be looking at, those kinds of things, would really recommend having a free and private consultation. There's going to be a link in the chat box that Kyle's going to drop in there. It takes around 30 seconds to fill out. It's just your details so we can get in touch with you and then we can help book this in. It's done usually online, particularly these days, everything's done online. But it is really an interesting opportunity to discuss your interests, goals, and achievements. Henry, you must remember when you did your consultation, how many years ago? What was it, 3 or 4 years ago now?
Yeah, so actually, after I participated in the TGCC 2018, so this was, I think, roughly like July 2018, not long after, I also scheduled a consultation. So I met with Duo over in Sydney. And yeah, so what I remember was at the time, I knew that I wanted to go overseas to study, but I didn't really know where to start. So I think if you guys go online and then you search up like advice for, writing your applications to the US or the UK, there's a lot of like different websites and people like giving different sorts of advice. So, there's a kind of like a lot of noise. So for me, I wanted kind of a very clear vision of like how I could achieve that goal of getting into those universities. So what we did in the consultation was, well, we basically kind of looked at my profile and then we kind of examined how that fit in with my target universities. So what was quite interesting about that was it kind of taught me a lot about prioritization, as in like, it's not simply enough to do a lot of different extracurriculars and try to hit as many targets as you can, because that doesn't kind of make you stand out in anything. So that first consultation, really, we discussed like what the broad strategy should be. And it also kind of, I guess, laid out a plan over the next 1.5 years for how Crimson could help me with that application.
Awesome. Yeah, I've sat in on a couple of consultations and I know they're like super helpful as well. So if you'd like to know, go through the process of requesting that consultation, as I said, Kyle has put that link in the chat box and we'll be sending that link as well in a post-event email. So yeah, get your questions answered. Ask your questions during the event by writing them in the Q&A function, and you can upvote your favorites to be answered as well. So let's get into it, how TGCC can pave your path to top universities. If you aren't aware at the moment, this is the top 20 universities. You can see that's for 2021. So they actually released the 2021 rankings halfway through 2020. And this, of course, is not like the be all and end all when it comes to which university is best for you. Not everyone should go to MIT, for instance. It's very competitive to get into and obviously is very tech focused. But generally speaking, like the majority of top universities, you will find them in the US or UK. And there are a couple other ranking systems. As I said, Times Higher Education is one. I think US News is a very popular one for US colleges. But you can see, obviously, like the Ivy League does feature quite heavily in here. The Ivy's been Harvard. What else we got there? UPenn, Yale, Cornell, Columbia as well, and Princeton, all featuring. And then other top great universities as well. UChicago, Oxbridge, Oxford and Cambridge are in there too. Imperial and UCL. So really the who's who of, the top universities that you might know about just because, they're in a lot of movies and dramas and everything. But if you're, serious about studying among the top students around the world, this is definitely, a good place to start in these ranking websites. And really when it comes to the US, they look for something a little bit different than what, other places around the world look for. Now, the US really looks for students who are an all-rounder, so students who exhibit a combination of leadership, intelligence, creativity, and initiative, which is fantastic if you've been a part of TGCC, which you get an opportunity to exhibit a lot of these qualities. So we'll go just one more slide here. In the US application insight, this is a quote from a former Stanford admissions officer. Obviously, we do have a former Stanford admissions officer joining on the webinar on Sunday, so a great one for those students aiming for the US. But basically, his advice was that they're looking for students who have taken the wheel of their own education. And that means that you're not just kind of going on along with the flow of high school and doing well in your subjects, but it means going above and beyond what you're doing and really investigating your own interests and finding your own passions. So when you apply to university, you're not just a quote unquote good student, but you're actually more of like a young adult. And there's a big difference. And, when I see maturity level, chatting to a student who's aiming for these universities, like you can tell that if you ask them, what's your favorite thing to do? They're not just going to say, oh, maths. Like they're going to say, oh, I'm really interested in maths because of, this thing, or I'm part of this competition, or I'm investigating this. They've got interests and passions. Henry, you apply to the US. What do you think about that quote from the former Stanford admissions officer?
Yeah, so I think that's really interesting because, one of the misconceptions, I guess, that I had before the consultation was that academics actually played, a very large role. So I'd say 50% or more of the application is dependent on your academics. Whereas, in fact, if you look at the people who have gotten in the past, that's actually far from the truth. I think if you were to compare someone who was academically very, at the top, with someone else who wasn't quite academically as strong, but had done extracurricular things like the TGCC, that person who had done TGCC would be admitted every single time.
Yeah, there you go. And we go on to the UK now, which mainly looks for a scholar. So someone who is a capable academic and passionate, rigorous, and resilient in the pursuit of knowledge. And the insights here is that throughout the application, you want to try and determine your area of interest and try and be as specific as possible about that area of interest. So if you've taken part in TGCC, that might be in, consulting or venture capital or whatever it might be. Explore literature in the area and really read widely. Think critically about the knowledge you've acquired and reflect on your learning as well. So it's much more kind of academically focused and much more academically focused in a particular area. So they're not necessarily looking for a broad academic, looking for someone who's gone above and beyond in a particular academic field usually, particularly if you're applying to an Oxford or Cambridge. So let's look at how to use TGCC in future applications, which is obviously an exciting part about being a participant in TGCC. So basically when, as Henry just touched on as well, when you're looking at the extracurricular profiles, most of the time extracurriculars fit under one of these very broad categories. Either it's institutional, innovative, or independent. And, your institutional extracurriculars are like your prefects or house captain, your organization ambassadors, et cetera, et cetera. And the thing about that is there is thousands of students who are a school captain around the world every single year, right? So in terms of the institutional stuff, it is good to have in your profile, and it does show that, particularly if you're at a big school, that you've been able to, rise among the ranks and be considered a leader in your space, which is great. But really, when you look a little bit further to the innovative and independent side of things, this is when students start to really kind of not be a student anymore. And as I said, start taking on that kind of young adult vibe where they're really pursuing their own thing and they're pursuing their own passion. And you can see what I've highlighted there, competing in an ideas-based competition. That's exactly what TGCC is. And I say an ideas-based competition because that is different from a maths competition where, it's a right or wrong answer. So regardless of your result in TGCC, you have been working as a team, you've been generating ideas, and you can use those ideas in your application. You can say, during TGCC, one of the ideas that we came up with was X, Y, or Z, and this was really central to another extracurricular idea, or this is something really central to what I want to do in the future potentially. So competing in an ideas-based competition is a really great chance for innovation. And then you can do your independent stuff as well, whether that be starting a successful blog or writing a novel or being a fundraiser. And on the other side of things, whether it be a school-based level or a local level or an international level, you can see that TGCC really fits into the international space in that you're representative in an international competition, which is what Henry was. So particularly if you've made it into those, international rounds, that's fantastic. But even if you haven't, you've still been representing your school. I know a lot of students have been representing their school or have been able to connect with other students as a result of being paired up with other students through TGCC. And that's a great opportunity to put that in there as either school-based or local-based competition as well. And Henry, I'm going to throw to you now because obviously you went through the application to the US and UK. You used TGCC in your awards section in your US application. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah, perfect. And what do you think? By putting that into your awards section, what were you trying to? Because I know that's everything is really carefully thought out when you put your application together, particularly for an Ivy League university. What were you trying to show by putting that into your application?
Yeah, so to speak to the US, I think what's really quite important is what kind of story you tell through your application. So, to touch on what I said before, these unis usually don't look for someone with kind of a random set of extracurriculars, but rather they want to see that all of the extracurriculars you're doing are kind of going towards a certain goal or kind of telling a certain story about the student that you would be at their university. So when it came to me and TGCC, so I knew that I was interested in business and economics, and those were the subjects that I applied for when it came to the US unis and for the UK as well. So putting the TGCC was kind of a way for me to show like an introduction to the world of consulting and to the world of business. And that played a huge role in enabling me to tell that story more effectively. And, I noticed that there's a question in the Q&A from Felipe. So is it a good thing to put TGCC as an extracurricular, even if you didn't make the regional finals? So, and I think, given the way that I used the TGCC in my US and UK applications, even though, I did kind of end up achieving a place, the way I used it didn't necessarily mean I had to win anything. It was more a way of me saying like, here's this experience that introduced me to economics, and then that enabled me to kind of flow into the rest of the application.
Yeah, absolutely. So your recommendation in that case would be to use it in some way, shape or form, but you don't necessarily need to be a winner to be able to use the application for sure. And you can see there, we've got a couple of tips for you. It does show achievement at a global scale, particularly if you go on into the international rounds. It does construct a compelling Common App essay or personal story. It certainly adds legitimacy to the UCAS personal statement, which is relevant to the UK application, with demonstrable achievements and application of academic skill. One of these ones that I put in here is that it shows that you're likely to contribute to consulting clubs and campus life. And that's a pretty important one as well. They want to have students on campus who are going to contribute to campus life. And if they see that you've taken part in extracurriculars like this, it's a fairly good indicator that you're probably going to continue with the activity. Actually, in the Common App, it does ask, do you intend to continue doing this activity at university? And so if you love the TGCC experience and you want to be part of, similar kind of competitions at university, great, tick the box and away you go. You might be able to get into some of the great consulting clubs at some of the top universities. And it also indirectly impacts other extracurriculars. And Henry, you might be able to speak to that. You started the economics club that you started in Sydney, and you think that being a pretty central part of TGCC gave you a little bit more clout and a bit more experience to actually, go ahead and lead that project.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. So this economic society, so it's kind of like a network of 13 schools across Sydney. It was kind of like a collective inter-school business society. And I guess our a flagship event was an inter-school stock pitch, which is actually quite related to the TGCC kind of similar format, except you're working with stocks as opposed to a company, but like very similar idea. And I think, being in the TGCC gave me an insight into how to run something like that. But I think just also in general, not even towards like running a competition, if you just want to start an economics club, I think just being here, going to the workshops, listening to the webinars, that's going to give you a lot to talk about.
Absolutely. Perfect. Now you can see there the 2021 Harvard supplemental essay. So in this case, if you're aiming to, for a university like Harvard, this is a pretty standard supplemental essay. So if you've got TGCC as one of your extracurriculars, they would want to, you could use TGCC as that extracurricular that you want to elaborate on in this particular instance. And that's a required prompt that Harvard has for this incoming and next application round. And in terms of job applications, I thought this was really interesting to put in, mainly because I at Crimson, was reviewing a lot of applications that would be coming through for various roles. And it's something that, even regardless of your results in TGCC, you should probably have on your application for the next 3 to 4 years. So even if you're like year 11 or year 12 or even year 10 right now, and you want to put in, your awards, or you want to put in your interests or hobbies, or you want to put in things that you've taken part in, I'd really recommend putting that on your resume, because it will make you stand out compared to students who, particularly for anything in the finance world, if you're aiming for internships or summer jobs or whatever, it's a great thing to put in there because it will stand out as against many other students who haven't even taken part in a case comp in high school. It does show initiative and genuine interest, and it shows you can adapt to remote work as well. So like you didn't use this coronavirus as an excuse just to, sit back and cancel all your extracurriculars. Like you went out and sought, we're trying to find other opportunities to get involved. And it gives you an opportunity to speak about real life experiences, which is often like the main thing that you want to talk about in an interview. But when you're a student, you might not have too many real life experiences, right? Well, TGCC gives you that chance to say, yeah, I worked in a team. It was a remote team. We had a case comp, etc. The case, and this is how we work the case, all that kind of thing. So it does give you an opportunity to talk about teamwork, business analysis, ideation, etc., which can be really helpful. And I know, Henry, you had another point on this before about how early some of the recruitment process starts for these, big financial firms as well.
Yeah, so one of the funny things I realized, so I started UPenn, I think about almost a month ago now. Something you realize is like the application process never stops. You're always applying to something new. And so in my case, it's kind of like if you want to go into consulting or banking, the recruitment process actually starts roughly like at the end of your first year or at the end of your second year. So this is the case for both the US and the UK. So in order, you don't have a lot of time to build up like a new resume from scratch in university. So what that means is you have to you have to be prepared for that already in high school. So by competing in the TGCC at this stage, you've actually set yourself up really well to do well in those like job applications as well further down the line.
Perfect. Absolutely. Let's get on to the next slide. So we'll have some, if there's any Q&A, Annie, maybe we can answer a few of the questions that have come through.
Sure. So we've got some questions through in the Q&A. So Stephanie would like to know, and this is a question for you, Henry, why did you decide it was a worthy investment to study abroad instead of staying in Australia, given that Australia is far more expensive? The US is far more expensive.
Yeah, great point. So I think 2 points. I think firstly, I like to point out that with the US in particular, there's a lot of financial aid available. So, I think a lot of Australian students that I know going over to the US are actually going on financial aid. And I know that Crimson actually has a lot of services that help you prepare for that. But my second point is, I guess, like, let's say you're comparing like paying the full price for a US education versus staying in Australia. I think for the career field of business slash consulting slash economics, it's actually very beneficial to go outside of Australia and, to go outside your home country and experience, I guess, study in the US. A few reasons for this. I guess, like, firstly, just having that experience outside, like, what is familiar to you, that's really helpful when it comes to a career. But I think secondly, I think for finance in particular, it's just a lot more, there's just a lot more opportunities available in America and in the UK. So for example, like New York is like the financial capital of the world, right? And similarly, like the city in London, that's also very, very busy. So I think, so I think it's definitely worth the trade-off if you look at the longer term benefits.
Yeah.
I definitely do.
Yeah. I mean, Andy, you're at UChicago doing your thing. Do you have any comments on that? You could probably answer that question too.
Yeah, so I can definitely relate to Henry's point. So I'm going into my second year, so 1 year ahead of Henry. And I've been doing a lot of recruiting myself, and especially with the alumni network at these top universities, it's so useful in terms of like getting like coffee chats with people. Like the alumni, they generally like love their university a lot. So they're very, very willing to come and like help you out, to like devote their time to like helping you. And so the thing for like finance and consulting is networking is so important. So honestly, like these alumni networks for your future, it's such a worthy like investment to go to these like good universities to like meet these amazing people. And also like the quality of the teaching and the professors is just a lot better, I feel, than I could have gotten at an Australian university.
Perfect. Thanks, Annie. We might go to the next slide just to keep things moving a little bit. But we do have an opportunity to ask more questions throughout, so we'll jump back into Q&A very, very soon. But that was a great question and answer. Thank you for both of your wonderful answers. Again, if you would like to request that free and private consultation, check the link in the chat box and fill that out. It takes around 30 seconds, and you can have that free and private consultation. So let's get into innovative business courses to aim for. So a lot of people on the webinar are aiming for business courses. And we want to try and show that not all universities approach the teaching of business or business management in exactly the same way. And really finding which course and which university fits you is like, a big part of the puzzle, particularly when there are so many options. I think a lot of students, I'm sure like a lot of students on the webinar are from Australia, but if you're from elsewhere around the world, you might be looking at, 2 or 3 local universities. Whereas if you're looking globally, you can really find a course that really suits you and you really love. So firstly, let's look at the top ranked universities for social sciences and management. Obviously, a few of the well-known ones there: Harvard, LSE, Stanford, Oxford, and Cambridge. This is by QS World Universities. This is their 2020 rankings, actually. They haven't updated this for 2021 just yet. And just a couple others that you should definitely consider. Places like UCLA, UPenn, which in some, circles is actually the number 1 university, particularly Wharton's business school there. NYU, UChicago, Northwestern, whole lot of other fantastic programs. And you should really have a look at, when you're going to a ranking website, go beyond the front page and actually investigate all the data that these ranking websites have, and then look into these universities. What makes, UCLA number 9, or what makes NYU number 13, or what are they actually being graded on, and what makes that university special. But I think perhaps a little bit more interesting than that is we've broken down some of, the top universities that you should be looking at and why you should be looking at them. So maybe we just go through maybe the first 2 columns there, Henry. So obviously Penn, Wharton, everything going on there, you know it best. Take us through it.
Yeah, so I guess before I continue, so with Penn, so you can either apply to the Wharton School of Business, or you can apply to, there's 4 schools. So Penn has a School of Nursing, they have a College of Arts and Sciences, they have a School of Engineering, and then there's the Wharton Business School. So for me, I actually applied to Penn's College of Arts and Sciences because at the time when I applied, I was kind of like more interested in economics as a theoretical concept, and kind of learning all those like other like non-vocational skills. But for you guys, if you're really interested and you're like, that business is absolutely what you want to do and you want to start as soon as possible, then I've heard really, really great things about Wharton. So I actually have a lot of new friends at uni who are currently going to Wharton. So it's kind of like, it's pretty much the top business program in the US, if not around the world. You're kind of interacting with professors who basically write the books on business that people read all around the world. So it's really quite special. They have a very, very strong global alumni network. And I think a huge thing about going to a school like Penn or Wharton is both the alumni network, but also the network of like students that you'll meet. And after you graduate, one of the massive benefits is you'll kind of keep in contact with your cohort for the rest of your life, and that's going to be kind of like a gift that keeps on giving.
Absolutely. And you can see some of the other courses that we've mentioned there, the Huntsman program and the M&T program, which is, combines computer science and business studies, or, the Huntsman program combining international studies and business. So these are like specialized niche programs that if you're really, into computer science and also into business or into international studies and business, there are, the Huntsman program is like one of the most competitive programs around the world. I'm sure M&T program is also super competitive. Henry, you probably know that better than I do. But, knowing the trend in America and the tendency towards computer science, I'm sure that's very popular too. So a lot of these programs and courses you probably won't be aware of if you're in high school right now. You might know of the universities, but you won't know of the intricacies of them. I certainly didn't know about the Huntsman program, etc., until I started at Crimson as a staff member. And yeah, it's really opened my eyes to see how many amazing, cool programs and opportunities that are out there. And that's certainly something you can discuss in your consultation as well. You can see NYU Stern. I've been to NYU, I visited NYU as a tourist. It was still amazing. And, fantastic place, down the road from Columbia, but a super different vibe to Columbia, which is really interesting. USC has actually some of the most innovative program in the world. The World Bachelor in Business is actually a really cool program where you get to study across 3 different continents: Asia, Europe, and the US. So that's a really interesting program that USC has put together. Michigan has, UMich has a fantastic reputation. The Ross School of Business there, the Bachelor of Business Admin, you can see is like, it's one of the top ranked for business. And Berkeley's Haas School as well. They've actually got the MET program there, the Management, Entrepreneurship and Tech program. Similar kind of vibe, I guess, to the M&T program in a sort of roundabout way. But some students will, I remember hearing a story of a Crimson student who got accepted into the MET program and got accepted into, I think they got accepted into Princeton, one of like the top Ivy Leagues, but they took the MET program over the Ivy League just because they knew that that's exactly what they wanted to do. That's the fit that they were aiming for. So you can see on the right, it might be a good one to screenshot. We'll get into the UK one as well now. So you can be a bit more aware of what's going on across the pond in the UK. Oxford's Economics and Management program. Henry, do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so when it came to my college decisions, it was comparing economics and management at Oxford with economics at Penn. So I think they're both really great programs. The difference there is in sort of like the coursework that you're going to be engaging with, really. So I think for economics and management in Oxford, and I guess just with UK universities in general, it's a lot more kind of academic and theory based. So for example, with econ and management, a lot of the coursework is based on reading. So kind of every week, your professor will give you a list of readings, and then you'll write an essay on that, and then next week you'll meet, discuss the essay, and then repeat. So I think that's like really, really good if you really like kind of reading and analyzing different perspectives. And on the other hand, the US is quite different. So I think they're both great programs, but they're very different programs. So I think for a lot of you guys who are considering studying at both, I would say definitely apply to both because, you can never kind of get too picky with these things, but definitely keep it in the back of your mind that these two programs are different and that will affect how you approach the applications when it comes to each of the US and the UK.
Fantastic. And that actually brings me to Kyle. Maybe you could drop the link for Sunday's presentation, which has Martin Walsh, a former Assistant Dean of Admissions at Stanford. It has Nicole Teo, who is a UK university strategist for Crimson Education, and Mario Scarella as well, who is a European university expert. And they're going to be looking at the differences in the US, UK, and Europe as to how they approach higher education. And you can ask them some fantastic application questions as well. So make sure to tune in for that event on Sunday. So the long-term benefits of top uni programs, this as well goes back to the question that we got from Stephanie, which in terms of like studying at the US or Australia or your local universities versus like your US, UK basically, is that a lot of the students at top MBA or postgrad courses are mostly selected from top undergrad programs as well. So if you look at, say, for instance, some of the universities, like the top universities, make it public where students or where their postgrad students did their undergrad. And the vast majority of times in those cases, you're looking at students who have done their undergrad at an Ivy League, Oxbridge, basically a top 30-ish university. There's not too many students that come from Australia, unfortunately, or anywhere else, unless you're really smashing it in your course. So it is very difficult to get into that. Some students say, oh, I'm going to study locally first, and then I'm going to go overseas, intending to try and get into like the Harvard Law School or whatever it might be. But it actually is very difficult to go into that postgrad pathway if you study locally, because you're going to be competing against a whole lot of students who have already done their undergrad at a top level. And studying at a top undergrad program as well can actually reduce the need for MBAs and postgrad. So a lot of people have this, image in their mind that they're going to be, doing some form of education for, 5-6 years or more after high school. When in actual fact, if you get a really good undergrad, you might be able to bypass that whole need to do an MBA or a postgrad because you already have the network, you already have the brand name next to your name that, people already know a bit about you. And of course, the networking advantages, which both Annie and Henry have spoken to. Henry, is there anything else that you would add to this in terms of the long-term benefits?
Yeah, no, I think you've covered it pretty well. I would say, and I guess this is less relevant for you guys now, but when you are selecting between the US and the UK, keep in mind that what subject you study or are able to study at an undergraduate level will affect what you can apply to at a master's level. So for example, for me, I'm quite interested in computer science. And one of the reasons I chose Penn was because there was the option to take classes in computer science, whereas that was, I guess, less realistic at Oxford. So kind of considering that long-term goal, I would say is quite important as well when it comes to uni selection.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of like knowing your entire pathway, right? Yeah, cool. And yeah, one of the things that I always say to students as well is if you're unsure about the course or you're unsure about the uni, go where the action is. So particularly if you're interested in business and finance, and as we've been discussing, like, the heart of that is New York. But these are like your main epicenters of business and finance. Also London, Los Angeles, Boston, Chicago, Shanghai, and Singapore. So you can't really go wrong if you're in and around these areas, right? And often proximity plays such a big role in your ability to get that internship or to, be in those circles where you get the opportunity to have, coffee with the hedge fund manager or whatever it might be. So if you're really unsure about the course or the uni, think even bigger and just think about which city do I want to be in where the action is. And hopefully when you are looking at overseas universities, we'll be in a situation where you can actually travel. And I know a couple of students who applied, last year actually have already gone overseas for their course despite everything that's going on. But hopefully by the time you guys are applying, international travel is back open for everybody. So let's look quickly at pathways to top companies as well. So if you're wanting to aim for like a top, whatever company it is, whether it be investment banking or something else, a tech or whatever it might be, this is particularly relevant to investment banking though, but it really is, it shows the power of these universities and the pool that these universities have. Nearly all the major investment banks offer summer internship analyst programs that last approximately 12 weeks. And of those analysts, roughly 60 to 80% are drawn from a list of target unis. That is a huge amount of students getting drawn from a small number of unis. In the US, the list includes, like, this is not an official list, by the way. This is just the trend that has occurred over the last however many years. And, it's almost like the done thing that, these top firms will get their summer analysts from these universities. So in the US, it's UPenn, NYU, UMich, Harvard, Columbia, Princeton, Cornell, Boston, University of Texas and Villanova are also quite popular. And in the UK, it includes unis like LSE, UCL, Oxford, Warwick, and Imperial. So really understanding, mapping out, as we've said, the journey. Like if you've got a target, not just of a university, but of a place that you want to work for or a job position that you're aiming for, look at, which university can best provide the steps to lead up to that company or to lead up to that position. That's a super important thing that we try and help students think about. It's not just about the course and saying, well, I've got a business degree. It's about where that's from and what opportunities it can provide. Henry, do you have any thoughts on this?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. I think, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would say it's definitely important to, like with these things, like especially if you know what you want to do in your career, it's quite important to be planning from a very, very early stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And one example that I wanted to give here is a former Crimson student, Brendan, who is from Canberra. So Canberra being the capital of Australia, if you're from overseas. He's the class of 2020 at Harvard. So he did just graduate and he was doing the Bachelor of Arts, Economics. He did an economics concentration and statistics as secondary. These were some of his high school ECLs. So he had a really good, ECL background. He was the school captain at Canberra Grammar. He was the founder of a tutoring company. He ended up actually working for Crimson as well as one of our tutors. And he was doing some software engineering. When it says software engineer for Atomic 212, he was just kind of like interning. He wasn't actually like going in there and, full-time staff member type of thing. But he was doing a lot of things during school and outside of school. Whilst he was at Harvard, he basically took full advantage of the fact that he was among these amazing students, supported by these amazing professors, and he really went all out and, was the founder of GoPay. He was a summer analyst at Blackstone. He was a business analyst for the Harvard College Consulting Group, which I'm sure a couple of students would be loving to be at after being involved in TGCC. He was a policy advisor to a politician here, Barnaby Joyce, and he was the investment banking at Gresham Partners. And as I said, he was the head of HSC Consulting at Crimson as well, whilst he was at Harvard. And excitingly, this is just a recent, news that has come from Brendan. He was accepted into Y Combinator, which, if you don't know, is like one of the best places to have a business idea accepted into. So he's got like a startup. I don't actually know what it does. It's very techie, and I'm not the most techie person in the world. But basically, having been accepted into Y Combinator pretty much ensures that it's going to go to market eventually, that like they're basically supporting him in setting the business up. It's already got like the foundations in there. And it's a really good, pat on the back, basically saying that, we believe in your company and we believe in your business idea. So who knows where to from here for Brendan, but that was a really good example of like, I guess, the trajectory that you can go on. And, people often compare like Australian universities and US universities thinking that they're, apples for apples, when in reality, like the opportunities that you have available to you, if you're at these top universities in the US or UK, is far and away, more expansive, and there's just so much more going on. The student body is so much more engaged too, because when you think about it, like if you're going to get into the US or UK, you need to have done, quite a lot of stuff during high school. So, you're likely to find really engaged, like-minded people at these top universities who have already got a hell of a lot of experience from their experience in high school. Whereas at Australian universities or universities around the world, it might just be academics that's required, which, you might meet someone who's super smart, but they haven't done anything interesting necessarily. So let's look at application support for top unis. This is, the challenge of applying overseas. When I say overseas, this particularly means to the US, UK, or Europe. It is really difficult to choose extracurriculars that make a difference. I know Henry touched on that earlier. It's difficult to stick to a plan during the busy final years of high school. You're trying to figure out all the different application platforms, whether that be the Common App, MIT's own application platform, the Coalition App, UCAS, etc. You're trying to tell your unique story, but you might not be sure what exactly that is or how to make it stand out. And you're working out where to apply, what to apply for. You're trying to think financial aid, scholarship. Your parents are asking you 1,000 questions that you don't know the answer to. It's stressful. And the reality is that even though a lot of students put in a lot of work for this application, a lot of the time it is unsuccessful. And that's the harsh reality, particularly if you're from a country that doesn't have a huge, culture of going to the US or UK. You're just not surrounded by that conversation. You're not really getting the insights that you need to make sure that you're making good decisions along the way. So that's why I guess Crimson came to be. It started out in New Zealand and now is, elsewhere around the world. But we certainly provide that support for students to help them figure out, what's your best pathway, what's your best application look like, and making sure that when you do press submit, you submit with confidence. Annie, what questions have we got coming through?
So Chris would like to know, Henry, when did you start preparing for applying to US and UK unis?
Yeah, great question. So I think for me, I officially started with Crimson halfway through my penultimate year. So that was, for me, that was year 11 in Australia. But I think, kind of looking at it from a longer term perspective, I really knew that I wanted to go to the US, UK a long time before that, right? So I think probably when I started high school, I kind of began to learn about studying overseas, and I knew from a very early stage that's something I wanted to do. But I think, I guess when I came to Crimson, it became really clear that a lot of the things I was doing that I thought were correct. So, in terms of extracurricular selection, prioritizing like academics and planning my time, a lot of things could have been done better. So I think had I joined earlier, I think it could have been even kind of better, I think, in my opinion. But I think officially I started with 1.5 years to go with Crimson.
I think one piece of advice that I heard from a student who is now at MIT, an Australian student, he said, spread the stress over as many months as possible was his advice. And every other student who has gone through the US application process is like, yes, that is very true. That if you can, if you have, that passion to study in the US, don't think that it's something that, you can put off until, I'll just do my application in year 12. Or I'm only in year 10 right now. What's the point? You can still be doing so much. And there's people around the world who are preparing from quite a young age, early high school, to get into these top universities. So there's always something that you can be doing if you're aiming to get into those top universities.
Yeah, definitely. I only started signing with Crimson in year 12, and it was a very hectic year for me trying to balance all the applications.
Yeah, got to crank it, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Just to add on that as well, I think, especially if you're an international student, so if we look at the US system, so in US schools, they actually it's very common for like each school to have a careers or like a university counselor who is specifically there to help you design your I guess your profile in a way such that it positions you really well for like Ivy League universities. And also the second thing was that a lot of universities do have like a quota for international students. So what you're looking at is basically if you're applying as an international student, it is going to be a lot harder for you than it is for someone applying internally inside the US. So I think given that, you're probably going to need all the help you get in terms of, you know, forming your profile because all the students inside the US have that help already. So yeah, just wanted to put that out.
Absolutely. Any more questions, Annie?
So on this idea of like starting early, Julia would like to know, what can you start doing as a freshman in high school if you want to apply to an Ivy?
Yeah, I mean, well, extracurriculars are the main thing, right? You know, like it's one of those things that if you're building up your candidacy, I think what Henry touched on as well about building like a cohesive story throughout your high school, your time in high school. So it's they're looking for like depth and breadth in your extracurriculars, and having depth in a couple of key areas is really important. So if you're aiming for like consulting or you're aiming for business programs and that kind of thing, like if you know being a part of TGCC, right, is something that you know really you enjoyed, then go out there and like get involved in more consulting competitions. Really drill down into, you know, maybe start a podcast around consulting. Like there's so many things you could be doing. It depends on what your passions or interests are. One thing that I would recommend or would not recommend actually is don't just run around and get involved in every single club or society that your school offers, because that's spreading yourself too thin, and being a member of something isn't, you know, all that special. So, you know, be careful as to what extracurriculars you choose, and don't be afraid to set something up yourself. Like don't wait for that high school leadership position. You can go out and start something, you know, tomorrow if you really wanted to. There's nothing really stopping you. And, you know, by the time you finish high school, you know, that could have either been a great success or it could have been a failure that you learn from and bounce back from. Either way, it will contribute to your story and your application when you eventually submit.
I think also yeah, just to add on one more thing, I think for a lot of students as well, the thing about starting early in high school, so it's quite so for a lot of these you know, top Ivy League institutions, it's very easy for an admissions officer to kind of tell when your extracurricular is kind of like a bit flimsy. So what I mean by flimsy is like you kind of like you started it for the sake of starting it, and you started it quite late in the process as well. It's like, you know, 1 month before you submit your application, you start this like not for profit. It's kind of like very obvious. So I think like in order to really you know, make sure that what you're doing is something that you want to do and you know you have like you are actually invested in, and in order for that to have like sufficient impact, you do kind of need to have a long run up to the applications.
Absolutely. Annie, just one more question perhaps?
So Marky would like to know, so for Henry, was TGCC your only business/economic related extracurricular? If not, did TGCC help expand your involvement in that area in any way?
Yeah, so you're very right in saying that it wasn't my only extracurricular in economics, but it was certainly one of my first. So you know, not long after I did TGCC, I kind of did 2 other things. So because some other projects I was doing before as well. But the 2 things that kind of came out of TGCC was starting the business study at my school, and then that eventually expanded to incorporate a lot of other schools. And the second thing was this Harvard essay competition that I did. And I think, you know, both are like not exactly the same as TGCC, but I would say, you know, kind of the topics that the case comp got me to start thinking about really helped a lot with those 2 things as well.
Can I just say on that as well, I think it's such an important thing to look at extracurriculars as being, you know, building blocks, right? When you look at experience, confidence, and most importantly, I think in some respects, is reputation. You know, what reputation are you building within your network at school, for instance, among your teachers, among your peers? as to who you are building your brand, in which direction. So if you take part in TGCC, right, doesn't matter what results you've got a couple of friends probably at your school who know that you've been a part of it. And if they see something else that, you might be interested in, they'll be like, hey, aren't you like the consulting economics dude? Aren't you going to be like the next kind of hedge fund manager? And if you start building that reputation, you'll start attracting all of these opportunities coming your way. And you'll start moving in that circle where people find these opportunities, and you can start building those blocks. And as I said, like, it's that confidence to go out and start something, or to build up something like a economic society or whatever it might be. So yeah, like, I think, TGCC is a great, if it's your first kind of like consulting extracurricular, which is totally normal if you're in high school right now. There's not too many things that are out there for high schoolers in the space of consulting. But it's the first step of many that you can keep building on in your time at high school in terms of that, economics, business management, consulting field. Cool. All right. Well, I will keep going then, and we'll have a few more questions at the end. I think we're almost up to time though. But yes, lastly, again, if you are interested in that consultation, of course, both Annie and Henry have been through that experience and were Crimson students who went on to get admission into some fantastic universities. It's really what Crimson specializes in, spends every waking hour thinking about. So, you're getting the right advice and you're getting the great support of Crimson mentors from around the world. And oftentimes you'll be paired up with, so actually we've got to think of a slide about that in a moment. So what you should ask your advisor, whether that be admission questions, candidacy questions, or career or decision questions, they're all worthwhile taking into. This is a good one to screenshot, including, how has COVID-19 changed overseas uni applications? What are the career advantages of studying overseas? How would my degree transfer back to my home country? Anything else really. This is a good one that you should be screenshotting, thinking about, taking to your Crimson academic advisor to ask. And as I said, like, the Crimson team isn't just one person giving you advice. You get a team of different, students and mentors and strategists and all these people from all these different walks of life who can give you great advice about their experience studying at these top universities and how that might impact you in terms of what you're doing at high school and how you can go on to be a great university admit as well. And this is a quote from Sandy, a student from Melbourne, who said that, her Crimson mentor really allowed her to have her own, personal voice and allowed that to shine through. So we don't write your essays for you or anything. That's illegal and unethical. But we do try and help you create your own personal voice throughout your whole application and really make sure that your story that you're putting forward is like the best possible story that you can create, and really, submit your application with confidence. And yes, some resources to get ahead. If you'd like to check out our website, crimsoneducation.org, we've got a blog there with heaps of information and great articles. As I mentioned as well, the Crimson Education YouTube channel. We're also on WeChat too, and you can check out the Instagram. Crimson Education on Instagram is popping with 27,000 followers, which we'd love to see get to 1 million one day, and maybe rival some of the big celebs. But right now with the, it's got great university information and great insights into the application process and universities around the world in general. So yeah, we send a massive thanks for joining today. But if you want to join on Sunday, that's where we'll get way more into the application on the US, UK, and European universities. And we'll kind of, as I said, deconstruct what differences there are, what might be more appealing to you, how it differs between the three major pillars of higher education, the US, UK, and Europe, and also, how it might compare to your local university experience as well. So these three experts, like, I'm so excited. I'm actually hosting this as well, but I'm going to kind of, shut up a little bit and let these three people speak when the webinar happens, because their insights are going to be well worth listening to. So that's Sunday, 27th of September. And you can check your local times there for details. Are there any more Q&As before we wrap up? Maybe one or two more questions, Annie, and then we'll hand people back their evenings or mornings or wherever they're calling in from.
Sure. So I think, Henry, you're definitely an example of a successful applicant. So how do you personally think that Crimson helped you refine your profile and made you more competitive when you were applying for overseas uni?
Yeah, great question. So I think, what Crimson really did the best was you know, I guess an analogy I can use is before I applied to Crimson, there were kind of like a lot of pieces to me. So you know, I had a lot of different extracurriculars. In terms of academics, I guess I was keeping up, but you know, when it came down to what I should write in my application, you know, like how I should respond to each like supplemental essay for each school, what I should even start to think about writing for my Common App, I had really like not too much idea. And for me, kind of just reading advice online wasn't quite enough because, you know, you can go online and you can kind of read the Common App essays that made other students successful. But the problem is the whole point of the Common App is that, you know, it can't really apply to anyone else but the person who wrote it. So I think, you know, it's quite important to get a team of people who like really get to know you, get to know what your strengths are, what like, you know, how would like what would the universities be looking for, and then kind of take that information and then turn that into an idea for a Common App essay, and you know all the other supplemental essays as well.
Absolutely. I mean, from my experience, I didn't apply overseas, full disclosure, but I know that a lot of students who I've spoken to, past Crimson students, they often think that they know what the application is about. Like they know, oh, I got to do the SAT and there's a Common App and there's some supplementary essays, da, da, da. But like when they actually get into it and are starting to actually do the things, they realize how much work it is and how much work it is on top of their schoolwork already. So, you know, one of the things that I think chatting to a lot of Crimson students is that we try and save students time. You know, you could read endless amounts of blogs and all the rest of it and try and figure it out for yourself. But at the end of the day, like you want to try and get the right information for you, for your situation, and help you apply to your top universities, whatever they may be. And I think, you know, if you're going to try and do that yourself, 100% take my hat off to you. It's a huge task, but there is a lot of, you know, room for error in that process. And I think what Crimson tries to do is we try and save students time as well as reduce, you know, greatly reduce the chances for error and increase the chances of success. So that's a broad example. I know people probably didn't get much out of that, but I think generally speaking that, you know, that time side of things becomes more and more important, you know, particularly in your final years of high school. Cool. Is there any other questions, Annie?
So probably the last question for today is from Jerry. So he would like to ask, if I have other commitments, in his case, music, does it look good in applications if he figures out ways to link other passions that he has with business/entrepreneurship?
Yes. I mean, like the music one is an interesting one. It depends on how good you are. Like, you know, I always say that these top universities are not looking for like, you know, 1,000 half decent violinists. They're looking for like 30 really good violinists, right? So what you can often do if you have a particular passion or interest for violin is, yeah, definitely, you know, try and use that skill and convert it into another innovative extracurricular. So if you're just playing, you know, like we've met a lot of students who are, you know, A-Marseille, or they are, you know, diploma level instrumentalists, which is great, but really like that's the only thing they've done in their entire time at high school. It's a little bit one-dimensional. It's a little bit like, okay, you had this great skill, but you didn't do much else with it. You didn't really show much innovation or much, you know, thought as to how your skill could improve the lives of others. So I think it's, yeah, definitely like if your passion is music, you know, see how you can use that to help others. There's been students at Crimson who have run programs to teach younger students and donate past instruments to younger students. There's been students who have, you know, done free concerts for like people in old age homes. So whatever, you know, you might be looking at, there's certainly a lot of ways that you can use your talents in music and change it up a little bit to, you know, make it a more impressive extracurricular or a more unique extracurricular.
Yeah, and I guess to add on to that as well, you know, if you are good at music or if you are good at a skill that is, you know, not business or entrepreneurship or economics, but, you know, you're also very good at it. So, for example, I have a friend who also, so he's going to Wharton this year, And what was really unique about his application wasn't kind of the business stuff that he did, right? So if if you think about all the other applicants who are applying to the top business programs, they probably all have some sort of like business or economics experience. So you have to have a way of kind of separating yourself out from that. And for my friend, that was kind of being really good at art. Not just at a school level, but like on an international level as well. So I think that's quite important. If you do have that skill, if it is kind of very large in terms of its impact, I would definitely recommend you stick with that as well.
Absolutely. That's good advice. Well, that wraps us up for today. Thank you again for everybody who's joined for today's session. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you've got some, better ideas as to where TGCC can hopefully take you in the future. Maybe it is to a top university, maybe it is to a top company, maybe it is onto a fantastic other extracurricular that you might develop with some friends in relation to the economics or consulting space. But whatever it is, we really look forward to seeing you on the webinar again on Sunday. As I said, that's a great one, whether you're looking at local universities or international universities, because these are three fantastic education experts that you can ask all manner of questions to. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you to Henry for sharing your amazing insights as always. And we look forward to seeing you on Sunday session. And again, we look forward to seeing you in the consultations as well, and having a chat about your pathway to the world's top universities. Stay safe, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you wherever else we see you. Online. Always online these days.
Thanks, Alex.
Cheers,
Great
mate.
to speak to everyone. Bye.
Cool. Thanks so much, everyone. Cheers.